So today I was scrolling on Twitter and I came across a really cool Black history fact that I didn't even know about. I also learned about a really cool Black activist that I didn't know about. So Brittany Packett Cunningham, and I don't watch a lot of TV, so don't get at me in the comment. But anyway, she shared an experience that she had with an email she received from an ally. And in this experience, she also shared the story of the first EMT. And in this experience, she also shared the story of the first EMT team. This is the email that she received from an ally. I know what you meant, but Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, don't you ever say something that dumb again on air. I'm a ally, and you have no idea how many racists will laugh their asses off over your claim on MSNBC that black folks invented ambulances. We are living in dangerous times. Don't feed the fire. I'm 2 weeks from 67. My family has been here since 1630. I have a bowl full of dar pins, and none of my ancestors ever owned slaves. Please listen to me about how to talk to folks. But as Brittany said, not only did she not say this is the story she was talking about, and the one I'm about to share with y'all because I think it's pretty cool. By the way, this is the podcast that I listened to today. I also tagged them below. Freedom House was founded in 1967, and it was the first emergency medical services staffed with paramedics who had medical training beyond basic first aid in the United States. The purpose of Freedom House was to serve the predominantly black district of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was staffed by predominantly black people. Prior to the 1960s, emergency ambulance services were either provided by the police paddy wagon, a fire truck, or a hearse driven by a local funeral home. Usually, when the police would show up to come and get a patient in need of emergency care, they would just load them in the back of the police paddy wagon. Both officers would get in the front, and the patient was left in the back of the paddy wagon to fend for themselves. And because funeral home directors, police officers, and firefighters were not medically trained to assist a patient in an emergency situation, they were losing a lot of patients on the way to the hospital. One of the issues in Pittsburgh is that when police officers were called for emergency situations, the dispatcher would often not send the police or take their sweet little time, or some people didn't want to be put in the back of a police paddy wagon that the police officers had tried to put them in the day before. And because of this, about 1,200 people a year were dying needlessly. Until one night, this man named John Moon, who was working the graveyard shift as an orderly at Pittsburgh's Presbyterian University Hospital, sat and watched as two men rushed into the ER trying to save a patient's life. According to 99% Invisible's podcast, the men that Moon witnessed were not doctors, they were not nurses, but Moon recognized that they were in a different type of uniform. And they were two black men who turned out to be two of the world's first EMTs. John was witnessing the birth of a new profession. According to 99% Invisible's article, emergency care wasn't always 24 hours at the hospital. Once the either police, the firefighters, or the funeral home directors got you to the emergency room, they had to ring a bell, and a guard had to come down and allow you in, and then a doctor had to be called to the hospital. Like I said, they lost a lot of patients because of this. There was often confusion about whose responsibility it was to rush to the scene to get the person who was needing emergency care. Whether it should be the firefighter, the police, or the funeral home director. No one knew. A former ambulance driver by the name of Philip Halen, who was also CEO of a civil rights organization called the Maurice Falk Medical Fund, which focused on health disparities due to institutionalized racism, saw an article one day that was talking about a black-operated jobs training program at Freedom House. And this program basically was a mobile grocery store that delivered healthy groceries to the black neighborhood. After reading that article, Philip thought to himself that something similar could be done to provide emergency care to the black neighborhoods. In 1966, Halen met Dr. Peter Safar, who was also known as the father of CPR. Safar had already been working on a solution to the problem. And so together, they decided to create the first EMS program. Safar felt that ambulances should be mini intensive care units and that there needed to be a team of medically trained professionals who could administer medical treatment on the way to the hospital. So he began to design a new type of ambulance, and then he created a 300-hour course to train the medical professionals. Together, Freedom House, Phil Halen, and Dr. Safar birthed a new profession of emergency medical services. The Freedom House EMTs went through a slew of psychological evaluations, interviews, and courses taught by medical professionals to prepare to become EMTs. When Freedom House first launched their EMT program, they contracted with the Pittsburgh police to receive the emergency phone calls for predominantly black neighborhoods. But when those calls would come in, the police refused to send them. The police felt like Freedom House was taking their jobs away, but Freedom House had a police scanner and they would try to get to the scene before the police so that they could try to save the patient. This resulted in the police threatening to arrest the EMTs if they didn't back off. Oftentimes, white patients would reject the help from the Freedom House EMTs and would choose to wait or die, I guess. And then medical doctors would sometimes refuse help from the Freedom House EMTs. But despite all of that, Freedom House started to grow in popularity. They started receiving about 6,000 calls a year. In their first year, they saved 200 lives. Doctors from all over started going to Freedom House and wanting to talk to the paramedics to see how they could copy the program. But then this guy, Pete Flattery, who was a conservative Democrat mayor, and other white neighborhoods started asking why predominantly black neighborhoods were getting better medical treatment or medical care than they were. Don't he look like Ron DeSantis to you? You know what he did? He slashed Freedom House's budget. He created an ordinance that banned ambulances from using their sirens in certain neighborhoods, and that made it harder for the ambulances to get to the emergency situation a lot faster. And in 1975, when Fieldhouse was chosen to field test the first standardized EMS curriculum, he announced that the city was going to roll out their own paramedic service. He lavished them with resources and money, and all of the new recruits for the new city EMT services were all white. Freedom House's medical director at the time, named Nancy Carolyn, got the mayor to add the Freedom House staff to the new EMS service, but they were all reassigned to non-medical positions. And by the 1990s, all of the EMTs were white, about 98% of them. After that, the world just forgot about them. But they went on to influence the EMS profession in other ways. I found this book in the comments on her post. Looks like it's going to be a great read. This is the podcast that I listened to and the article that I read. And if you are an ally, don't do what the lady in the email did. Be more like Phil Halen and Safar and help get shit done.